The clock ticks past midnight again, and the other side of the bed is still cold. Tom's working late, or so he says. It's become the soundtrack to my evenings, the silence, the waiting, and that incessant tick-tock reminding me how alone I feel. It's funny, in a tragic sort of way, how you can share a bed with someone and still feel like you're worlds apart. I wasn't always this cynical. There was a time when Tom and I would laugh until our sides hurt, plan spontaneous trips for the weekend, and fall asleep talking about everything and nothing. But those days are as gone as the warmth from his side of the bed. Work, his eternal mistress, took that away from me. Took him away. It's not like I planned to fill that void with someone else. But human connection isn't just a want, it's a need. And Alex? Well, he was unexpected. We met at the bookstore where I work, bonding over our mutual disdain for self-help books, pretending to have all the answers. Our coffee breaks turned into coffee dates, and before I knew it, I was looking forward to our meetups more than I'd care to admit. One night, after venting about my latest solo dinner, Alex looked at me with those understanding eyes and said something that tipped the scales. "You deserve to be happy, Sarah." And just like that, our casual friendship crossed into something more. Something secret. Something that felt like betrayal yet oddly comforting. Hiding Alex's messages became second nature. Delete, erase, forget. It was a mantra I lived by, each text a reminder of what I was doing and who I was becoming. I even started lying about working late, mirroring Tom's excuses, to cover up my absences. Inventory checks, I'd say, hating myself a little more each time. Tom never questioned it, at least not directly. But I caught him looking at my phone more than once, curiosity etched on his face. Maybe if he'd asked, I would have confessed. Maybe if he'd shown any sign of caring, I would have stopped. But he didn't, and I didn't. The gap between us widened, filled with secrets and silence. It's not that I don't love Tom. I do, or at least, I did. It's just that somewhere along the way, we lost ourselves to routine and resentment. And as I lay here, listening to the clock and waiting for a man who stopped coming home to me long before tonight, I can't help but wonder if this is all there is. If maybe, in our own twisted ways, we're both seeking something that slipped through our fingers years ago. But as each day bleeds into the next, one thing becomes painfully clear. The further I wander down this path with Alex, the less likely it is that I'll find my way back to the life I once knew. And maybe, just maybe, I'm okay with that. The weekend getaway was supposed to be a surprise, a gesture from Tom that felt like a whisper from the past, reminding me of better days. As we drove up the coast, the ocean stretching wide and endless beside us, a part of me wanted to confess everything. The guilt, which I'd managed to keep at bay, suddenly washed over me like the waves crashing against the shore. But then, I remembered all the nights I'd spent alone, waiting for a husband too consumed by his work to notice me fading away right beside him. I thought this might help us reconnect, Tom said, his eyes fixed on the road, a hopeful note in his voice that I hadn't heard in ages. I wanted to believe that we could find our way back to each other, that this weekend could erase the lies and secrets that had wedged between us. But the reality of Alex, with his messages burning a hole in my pocket, was a constant reminder of the path I'd chosen. No amount of sea air can fix what's broken, I thought to myself, pushing the guilt aside. Tom's neglect drove me to this. He's as much to blame as I am. So, I smiled, thanked Tom, and continued to live the lie, convincing myself that I was the victim of circumstances beyond my control. But the charade couldn't last forever. A few days after our trip, I carelessly left my phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. Tom had been growing more suspicious, I could tell, but I'd grown careless, too caught up in the thrill of my affair with Alex. The explicit message that Tom found was more than just words, it was the unraveling of the life we'd built together. I didn't see Tom's initial reaction. I didn't see the hurt or the betrayal that must have flashed across his face as he read Alex's words. But I felt the shift in our home, a silence more profound than the one that had driven me into Alex's arms. Tom, ever the tactician, didn't confront me. Instead, he chose a path I hadn't expected. Silent collection of evidence, a preparation for a confrontation that would shatter whatever fragile peace we had left. Unaware of Tom's newfound knowledge, I grew bolder in my deception. Late nights weren't just explained away. They were barely mentioned, as if my affair had become an open secret that neither of us dared to acknowledge. But Tom was watching, waiting. The GPS tracker he installed on my car was his silent witness, tracking my every move, every lie, every rendezvous with Alex. And still, I continued, lost in a delusion that I could keep this double life spinning indefinitely. The guilt that had once gnawed at me was buried under layers of justification and denial. In my mind, Tom's neglect had given me a free pass to seek happiness elsewhere, even as I ignored the growing chasm my actions had created. But lies have a way of catching up with you, especially when you're no longer looking over your shoulder. Tom's silence was not forgiveness. It was the calm before the storm, a storm I was blissfully unaware of as I spiraled further away from the life I once cherished. The thrill of the forbidden, once a whisper in the back of my mind, had grown into a roar I couldn't ignore. Each secret rendezvous with Alex, each message exchanged under the guise of normalcy, felt like a victory against the mundane life I'd felt trapped in. With Tom's late nights and my own escapades, our home had become nothing more than a stage for our separate lives to play out, intersecting only in the most superficial ways. I was naive, foolishly so. My confidence in my ability to juggle lies like a seasoned performer left me blind to the silent storm brewing in Tom. He had become a shadow in our home, his presence marked more by the evidence he was quietly gathering than by the interactions we shared. Photos, GPS data, the digital breadcrumbs I'd left behind without a second thought were all being collected with a meticulousness I hadn't given him credit for. In my arrogance, I failed to see the change in Tom. His silence, once a sign of defeat, had morphed into something more calculated, more dangerous. It was a strategy, a weapon he wielded with precision as he prepared to turn my world upside down. And amidst my carelessness, evidence of my betrayal became more blatant, a testament to my underestimation of the man I had married. The gift from Alex, a necklace that was far too expensive and far too intimate, was left out in the open, a silent declaration of my infidelity. It was a mistake, one that would cost me more than I could have imagined. Tom, with the patience of a hunter, waited for the perfect moment to strike, to expose the fragile house of cards my life had become. His revenge began not with a confrontation but with an anonymous package sent to Alex's wife. The evidence of our affair, laid bare for another victim of our selfishness, was the first domino to fall in a chain reaction I hadn't anticipated. Alex's wife confronted him, and the secret life I'd so carefully built began to crumble around me. Word of Alex's predilections, his history of targeting married women, spread like wildfire, igniting whispers and judgment from those we knew. I was oblivious to the extent of Tom's plan, to the meticulous way he'd set the stage for my downfall. My world, once controlled and calculated, was unraveling at the seams, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. As Alex faced the consequences of our actions, the rift between him and his wife widening with each passing day, I remained in the dark about the role Tom had played in his exposure. My false sense of security, my belief that I could navigate the consequences of my choices without lasting damage, was shattered. I was left to face the reality of my actions, unaware that the man I had betrayed was the architect of my undoing. The world outside blurred as I raced through the streets, my heart pounding in my chest with a mix of anticipation and dread. Tonight was our anniversary dinner, a milestone I'd almost forgotten amidst the chaos of my affair with Alex. It was supposed to be a celebration of us, of our life together, but the weight of my secret made it feel more like a countdown to an inevitable confrontation I wasn't prepared for. In a moment of clarity, or perhaps desperation, I had decided to end things with Alex. The thrill that once fueled our clandestine meetings had fizzled into a gnawing guilt that I could no longer ignore. I wanted to find my way back to Tom, to the life we'd built before I lost myself in a web of lies. Tonight, I whispered to myself, I'll make it right. But as I sat across from Tom at our favorite restaurant, the familiar setting of so many happy memories now felt like a stage set for a play I hadn't rehearsed. Tom was quiet, his usual warmth replaced by a calculated calm that sent shivers down my spine. He knows, the thought crept in, unwelcome and terrifying in its possibility. The meal passed in a blur, each course a step closer to a climax I wasn't ready for. And then, as dessert was served, Tom finally broke the silence. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady, "I know about Alex." The words hit me like a physical blow, and I struggled to maintain my composure. The evidence laid out before me, photos, messages, a detailed account of my betrayal, left no room for denial. My heart raced as I tried to form words, any words, that could explain, justify, or at least soften the blow. "Tom, I was lonely. You were always working, and I just..." My voice trailed off, the excuses sounding hollow even to my own ears. Tom listened, his expression unreadable, as I stumbled through my apology. But it was what came next that truly broke me. He spoke of his silent suffering, the pain of knowing yet choosing to gather evidence for a confrontation he wished he'd never have to face. And then, the revelation that chilled me to the bone. Tom had not only uncovered my affair but had meticulously planned his revenge, exposing Alex and ensuring that the consequences of my actions would ripple far beyond our shattered marriage. The realization that I had been completely oblivious to the unfolding drama, so absorbed in my own deceit that I failed to see the depth of Tom's pain, was a bitter pill to swallow. As Tom spoke of his plans to leave, to start anew away from the wreckage of our life together, I felt the final threads of our connection snap, leaving me adrift in a sea of my own making. The drive home was a blur of tears and regret. The silence that had once been my accomplice in deceit now echoed with the harsh truth of my actions and their irrevocable consequences. The house that had been our home felt like a mausoleum, a monument to a love that had died, not with a bang, but with a whisper of betrayal. In the solitude of our bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of a life I had taken for granted, I realized the full extent of my folly. The man I had loved, the life we had shared, was gone, sacrificed on the altar of my selfishness. As the night stretched on, the weight of my choices pressed down on me, a constant reminder of the cost of seeking happiness in the arms of another. And so, in the darkness, I faced the truth I had avoided for so long. That in seeking to escape my loneliness, I had only succeeded in isolating myself further, a prisoner of my own making in a world of shattered illusions and broken hearts. I never imagined waking up to a world where the whispers of my own home turned against me, where the eyes of friends and family reflected a story I was too afraid to read. The morning Tom announced he was leaving, not just me, but the town, the finality of it echoed in the empty spaces of our home, spaces once filled with laughter and love, now repositories of silence and regret. "I've filed for divorce," he said, the words devoid of anger, carrying only the weight of a decision made long before spoken. His resolve was a mirror, reflecting a truth I had dodged with every lie, every secret meeting. My pleas, my apologies, they fell on ears that had heard too much, seen too much. "Sarah, it's over," he said, not as a declaration of war, but as a surrender to an inevitable peace he sought away from the wreckage I had caused. The community I once cherished became a tribunal I couldn't face. Friends who had celebrated our marriage, colleagues who had admired our partnership, now looked through me with a mix of pity and disdain. Their judgment, though silent, was a sentence I carried with me, a brand marking me as the architect of my own desolation. And Alex, the man for whom I risked everything, became a ghost, his promises as empty as the apologies he whispered in the dark. His abandonment was a cold realization of my solitude, a solitude I had crafted with each decision to stray further from the vows I once held sacred. The day Tom left, our home felt like a shell, a structure devoid of the life we had built. The memories, once vibrant, now taunted me from the walls, the furniture, the very air that seemed to whisper his name. I was left to wander through the remnants of a life I had taken for granted, each room a chapter of a story that had ended. In the aftermath, the isolation was suffocating. Attempts to reach out, to explain, to seek forgiveness, were met with cold shoulders and turned backs. The community I had once been a part of withdrew their warmth, leaving me to face the cold reality of my actions. The nights were the hardest, the silence a constant reminder of the emptiness beside me. The bed we once shared, where we dreamed together, became a vast ocean of sheets and pillows, each night a journey across a sea of regrets and what-ifs. As the days turned to weeks, and the weeks to months, the reality of my new existence settled in. The vibrant life I once led was now a monochrome shadow of its former self, each day a reminder of the cost of my choices. The laughter, the love, the companionship I had once taken for granted, now lost in the echoes of a past too painful to revisit. In the end, the house that had been our sanctuary became my prison, the walls not just barriers to the outside world, but to the life I had once known. And as I moved through its rooms, a specter in my own home, I realized the truth of my situation. I was not just left behind. I was erased, a footnote in the story of a love that once was, now just a cautionary tale of loss and consequence. The ringing silence of the house was a constant reminder of the upheaval my life had become. Once filled with the echoes of laughter and shared secrets, it now stood as a monument to my mistakes, each room whispering tales of betrayal and loss. In a desperate bid for connection, for a semblance of the life I once took for granted, I reached out to friends and family, only to be met with cold shoulders and unanswered calls. The realization hit hard. The community I had cherished, the people I had loved, had turned their backs on me. Siding with Tom in the silent war one hadn't even known I was fighting. Forced to confront the stark reality of my actions, I found myself spiraling into a vortex of regret and self-reproach. The absence of Tom's presence, once a source of frustration, had become a gaping wound, a constant ache for the comfort and stability I had so recklessly thrown away. My reflection in the mirror was a stranger, the weight of my decisions etching lines of sorrow and isolation deep into my face. The fallout extended beyond the personal, poisoning the well of my professional life as well. Whispers and sidelong glances followed me through the corridors of the bookstore, my once sanctuary of escape now a battlefield where rumors and judgment lay siege to any remaining semblance of dignity. My affair, a private folly, had become public spectacle, tarnishing my reputation and alienating me from colleagues who once respected me. The financial ground beneath me crumbled as the divorce proceedings laid bare the extent of my fall from grace. The settlement, heavily skewed in Tom's favor, was a legal confirmation of my guilt, stripping me not just of my marital status but of the lifestyle I had known. Each document signed was a nail in the coffin of my old life, sealing away the dreams and plans we had made together. In the quiet of the night, with no one to turn to and nowhere to hide from the consequences of my choices, the dam finally broke. Tears, long held at bay by denial and defiance, flowed freely, each one a testament to the pain and destruction I had wrought. The breakdown was not just emotional but existential, a reckoning with the person I had become, the harm I had caused to the people I loved. As the reality of my new existence settled in, a life devoid of the warmth and companionship I had so carelessly discarded, the full magnitude of my folly became painfully clear. The journey ahead, once a path shared with Tom, now stretched before me, dark and uncertain. In the aftermath of the storm I had created, I was left to navigate the ruins alone, a solitary figure in the landscape of my own making, searching for a way to rebuild from the ashes of a life undone by betrayal. From the moment I wake up to the second I force my eyes shut at night, the weight of judgment hangs heavy on my shoulders. It's a cloak made of whispers, stares, and the turned backs of those I once called friends. The world outside my door feels hostile, a battlefield where my presence is the enemy. So, I retreat, barricading myself within the walls of a home that feels more like a prison with each passing day. My existence shrinks to the confines of these four walls, where the only judgment I face is my own, and even that is more than I can bear. In a desperate attempt to claw my way out of the hole I've dug for myself, I start volunteering at community events. It's a feeble attempt to stitch back together the fabric of a life I tore apart, thread by thread. My hands, once idle, now busy themselves with tasks that might, in some small way, start to repay the debt I owe to the world I turned upside down. But redemption, it seems, is not so easily won. My presence at these events is met with cold shoulders, whispers that halt when I draw near, and eyes that look through me as if I were made of glass. I muster the courage to apologize, to speak the words that have been festering inside me, eating away at whatever peace I might find in solitude. But apologies, I learn, cannot always mend what's been broken. Tom, the man I vowed to stand by in another life, meets my attempts with a silence that cuts deeper than any words of hate could. The rejection is a bitter pill, a reminder of the chasm my actions have carved between us, too wide and too deep to ever bridge again. In the quiet that follows, reflection becomes my only companion. I'm forced to look in the mirror, to confront the stranger who stares back with haunted eyes. The pain I caused, the lives I upended, it all comes crashing down, wave after wave, leaving me to drown in the sea of my own making. The realization of what I've lost, the love that slipped through my fingers like sand, becomes a constant ache, a ghost that haunts the corners of this empty house. The thought of escaping, of shedding this skin marked by scandal and starting anew, becomes a beacon in the darkness. A new city, a new life, where the shadows of my past don't stretch quite so long, this fantasy becomes my lifeline. But with the dream of escape comes the acknowledgement of what I'm leaving behind. A marriage that was once my harbor, now the wreckage upon which my mistakes are impaled. Acceptance is a slow process, a bitter medicine that I swallow day by day. I come to understand that responsibility for the fallout rests on my shoulders, a burden I must bear alone. Forgiving myself, however, proves to be the hardest battle yet. How do you forgive yourself when the cost of your mistakes is etched in the lives of those you love? How do you move forward when every step is weighted with regret? The decision to leave town is not a choice but a necessity, a recognition that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. My departure is marked not by fanfare or tearful goodbyes but by a quiet resignation to the consequences of my actions. The rearview mirror reflects a life undone, a future uncertain, and a road that leads away from everything I once held dear. In the end, the journey I embark on is one of solitude, a path I must walk alone, carrying the lessons of my past like stones in my pocket. There is no redemption waiting on the horizon, no absolution to be found in distance or time. Only the acceptance that some mistakes carve scars too deep to ever fully heal, and the understanding that moving forward means living with the echo of what was lost, a whisper of what might